The Galaxians were known throughout the galaxy as the most powerful and advanced species. Their technology was unmatched, and their fleets ruled the stars. They had explored countless planets and discovered many secrets, but nothing could have prepared them for what they found that day. It started with a simple mission. One of their deep space explorers was scanning the farthest regions of the galaxy when it stumbled upon something strange. At first, it looked like just another dead rock, floating aimlessly through space. The explorer almost passed it by, but something caught its attention. There was a faint signal, weak and old, coming from the rock. Curious, the explorer sent a message to the nearest Galaxian research station. The scientists at the station were intrigued. They hadn't found anything new in this part of the galaxy in centuries. The signal was old, almost as if it had been sent out years ago, but it was still there, waiting to be heard. They quickly gathered a team and sent a fleet of ships to investigate. As they approached, the image of the object slowly became clearer. It wasn't just a rock. It was a ship, a massive ancient warship, hidden deep within an asteroid belt. The ship was enormous, its shape unlike anything the Galaxians had ever seen. The outer surface was covered in strange markings and symbols, ones that none of their experts could recognize. Some of the markings seemed to glow faintly, like they were still alive. The ship looked like it had been abandoned long ago, left to drift in space for centuries, maybe even millennia. Its once great engines were silent, and its weapons were rusted and still. It was as if the ship had been forgotten, lost in time. The Galaxians were excited but cautious. They had no idea who built this ship or what secrets it might hold, but they were determined to find out. The scientists quickly organized a team to board the ship and begin their investigation. As they approached the airlock, a sense of awe filled the crew. This wasn't just any ship. This was something ancient, something important. They had no idea what they were about to discover. The first Galaxian scientist to step aboard was Dr. Zoran, a brilliant engineer who had spent his life studying ancient technologies. He cautiously entered the ship, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The interior was dark, cold, and musty, with the faint smell of decay in the air. The walls were lined with strange panels and buttons, most of which had long since stopped working. Yet there was still a hum of energy, faint but unmistakable. Something was still alive on this ship. As Dr. Zoran moved deeper into the ship, he found a large central chamber. There, in the center, stood a control console. It was covered in dust, but there was no mistaking it. It was the heart of the ship. He carefully wiped away the dust, revealing strange symbols that seemed to pulse with energy. Without thinking, he activated the console. Suddenly, the ship came to life. Lights flickered on across the chamber, and the air grew warmer. The old, forgotten ship hummed with energy, as if it had been waiting for someone to wake it up. The console before Dr. Zoran flickered to life, showing strange symbols and images. For a moment, he was stunned. He couldn't understand any of it. But then, the symbols began to shift, and a voice spoke from nowhere. The voice was soft but clear, and it was in a language Dr. Zoran couldn't understand. But the tone was unmistakable. It was intelligent. This was no ordinary ship. It had been built by a species that understood advanced technology far beyond what the Galaxians had ever imagined. The voice continued, and Dr. Zoran realized something shocking. This ship was far more than just a relic. It was still functional, still alive, and it seemed to be calling out for something. He quickly alerted the rest of the crew, who rushed into the chamber. They gathered around the console, trying to decipher the symbols and the voice, but none of them had ever seen anything like it before. They knew it was important, but they couldn't yet understand how. All they knew was that this ship, this ancient vessel, had a story to tell, a story that could change everything they knew about the galaxy. But who built this ship, and where had they gone? The Galaxians had no answers yet, but one thing was clear. The discovery of this ship was the beginning of something bigger than they could have ever imagined. As the crew continued to explore, they found more clues, More symbols, more strange devices, and more evidence that this was no ordinary ship. It wasn't just a relic from an ancient race. It was a weapon, a warship unlike any the Galaxians had ever seen, and it was still ready to fight. The Galaxians had stumbled upon something that was far more than they bargained for. They had discovered the legacy of a species thought to be long gone. A species that had built this ship, and perhaps many others, with technology that was far beyond their own. Little did they know, this discovery was only the beginning. The secrets of the ship were waiting to be unlocked, and the truth about who had built it was about to be revealed. The Galaxian crew stood in silence, staring at the control console. The ship's systems had been inactive for so long, yet now they were flickering back to life. It felt like the ship was awakening from a deep sleep. For the first time in centuries, the lights came on, faint at first, but growing stronger. It was as if the ship itself was stretching after a long nap. Dr. Zoran, the lead scientist, watched in awe. The screens in front of him began to flash, showing strange patterns and symbols he couldn't understand. The ship's computer systems, once dormant, were now humming with energy. The quiet of the ship was slowly replaced by a low, almost imperceptible buzzing sound, like the heartbeat of a giant machine. The atmosphere in the room changed. What had started as an exciting discovery was now starting to feel alive. "Is this normal?" asked Captain Irix, one of the Galaxian commanders, standing just behind Dr. Zoran. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of unease in it. Dr. Zoran swallowed. "I've never seen anything like this. This ship is reacting as if it recognizes us." As he spoke, the strange symbols on the screen began to shift. It was almost as though the ship was trying to communicate. The Galaxian crew gathered closer, watching closely. The symbols turned into images, flashing quickly, images of stars, planets, and battles. The ship's history, a record of its travels. They didn't know, but the images were captivating. Then, without warning, the loud hum grew louder, and the voice from before echoed through the chamber again. This time, the language was different, but somehow it felt familiar. The crew couldn't understand the words, but they could feel the urgency in the tone. The voice sounded like it was calling out for something, or perhaps to someone. "We need to figure this out," Dr. Zoran said, more to himself than to anyone else. His mind raced. The voice. It was almost as if the ship was alive, calling out for help or offering a warning. He didn't know which. The crew began to examine the ship's systems, trying to make sense of the voice and the symbols. They started activating more consoles, cautiously pressing buttons, trying to get a clearer response. The ship was responding to them, but not in a way they could fully comprehend. It was as if the ship knew they were there, and it was waiting for them to do something. Captain Irix's eyes narrowed as he looked around. "There's something more to this," he muttered. "This ship, it's not just an old weapon. It's been waiting." Just then, the ship's hull trembled slightly. The walls vibrated, and the floor beneath them seemed to pulse with energy. The crew looked at each other in surprise. It felt as though the ship itself was breathing. Dr. Zoran stepped back. "It's alive. It's reacting to us." The ship's lights flashed rapidly, as though it was preparing for something. Then, all at once, the central screen flickered and stabilized. A map appeared, one of the galaxy, stretching far and wide. But there was something strange about the map. It showed only a small part of the galaxy, focusing on a particular sector, a place that no one had ever explored. "This sector," Captain Irix muttered. "Why is it showing this? It's beyond known space." The map zoomed in, showing a planet. The planet was dark, almost lifeless, but the ship's systems kept focusing on it. It wasn't like anything the Galaxians had seen before. It was as though the ship was telling them to look closer. Dr. Zoran stared at the screen, his mind racing. "Is it a threat?" asked one of the crew members, his voice full of uncertainty. "No," Dr. Zoran answered quickly. "I don't think so. It's guiding us." The ship's systems hummed louder, and the voice came again, clearer this time. The crew could understand a few words. Return. Must. Protect. The words echoed in their minds. A cold shiver ran down Dr. Zoran's spine. Protect. From what? The lights in the ship brightened, and the control panels began flashing with increasing intensity. It was as though the ship was urging them to act. The Galaxians had never seen anything like this before. They had always thought of themselves as the most powerful species in the galaxy, but this ship, it was different. It was more than just an ancient weapon. It was a living thing, with its own will and purpose. Suddenly, the ship's massive engines roared to life. The entire structure shook as though it was about to launch. The Galaxian crew exchanged nervous glances. They had no idea what was happening, but they knew one thing for certain. The ship was no longer just a relic. It was a force to be reckoned with. "We need to get out of here," Captain Eric said, his voice steady but filled with concern. "This ship is taking us somewhere. We don't know where, but we need to be ready." But Dr. Zoran wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the screen, his mind racing. The ship was waking up, and it seemed to be preparing for something big. And the Galaxians were about to be part of it. The Galaxian crew stood on edge as the ship's engines roared to life, louder than ever before. The vibrations beneath their feet were stronger, the hum of energy filling the air. It was as though the ship had come alive, not just to move, but to take control. Captain Erix paced back and forth, his eyes narrowed. "What is it trying to tell us?" he muttered to himself. The strange symbols and messages on the screens had only made things more confusing. The ship had been silent for centuries, but now it seemed desperate for them to follow it. Dr. Zoran stood at the console, his face pale. He was staring at the same map that had appeared earlier, the one focusing on the dark planet in a distant sector of the galaxy. The ship's systems were still trying to guide them there, and there was no way to ignore it. "We don't have a choice," Dr. Zoran said, his voice steady but uncertain. "The ship is taking us there. It won't let us leave." The crew had no choice but to follow. They had no idea what awaited them at this strange, forgotten planet, but it was clear the ship had its own plan, and somehow they were all part of it. The journey felt long, the silence between the crew members heavy with anticipation. The ship's engines continued to hum, and the walls seemed to pulse with energy. Every now and then, the strange voice echoed through the ship, a series of words no one could fully understand. But one thing became clearer. This wasn't just any ship. It had a purpose, a mission. Finally, after what felt like days, the ship arrived at the planet. The dark, lifeless surface came into view. The crew stared in awe. It was a barren world, with jagged mountains and deep craters. Nothing about it seemed welcoming. In fact, it looked almost dangerous. The ship began to descend toward the planet, the atmosphere thick with tension. The crew held their breath as the ship's landing gear extended. With a smooth landing, the ship came to rest on the surface, its massive form casting a shadow over the barren land. Captain Erix turned to Dr. Zoran. "What now? What is this place?" Dr. Zoran's fingers flew across the console, searching for answers. The screens flashed with more symbols, and suddenly, a new message appeared. "This is the world of the humans." The words hit the crew like a bolt of lightning. "The humans," Captain Erix echoed, his voice filled with disbelief. "But humans were just a myth. We thought they were gone, extinct." Dr. Zoran's heart raced. "I don't know what's going on, but this ship, it's telling us something we don't fully understand. We need to explore." With no other choice, the crew gathered their equipment and prepared to leave the ship. As they stepped out onto the planet's surface, the air was cold, dry, and still. There was no life, no movement. It felt like they had landed on the edge of the universe, in a place where time had stopped. The ship's doors slowly closed behind them, and the crew walked cautiously toward a distant mountain range. The ship's systems were still guiding them, but there was something unsettling about the way it moved. It wasn't like any machine they had ever encountered. It was like it had a mind of its own, a will to push them forward, deeper into the unknown. As they climbed the jagged cliffs, they found something unexpected. A set of ruins. Ancient structures, half buried in the dust. At first, the Galaxians thought it was just more old debris, but as they got closer, they saw something that made their blood run cold. The symbols on the walls were the same symbols they had seen on the ship. The markings were not just random. They were a language, one that the crew had never encountered. And it wasn't just on the walls. The symbols were everywhere, on the ground, on stones, on the ruins themselves. "This is their language," Dr. Zoran whispered, his voice full of awe. "These ruins, they were built by the humans." The realization hit them hard. The humans weren't just an ancient species. They were the ones who had built this ship. They had built these ruins. They had once been a powerful force in the galaxy, with technology that far surpassed anything the Galaxians had ever known. But where were they now? Suddenly, the ship's voice came through the air again, clearer than before. The crew froze, listening carefully. This time, they could understand a few words. Protect. Legacy. Lost. The voice seemed to echo from all directions, filling their minds with a sense of urgency. "They didn't disappear," Dr. Zoran said, his voice shaking. "They left something behind. A legacy, and we just uncovered it." The crew exchanged nervous glances. The truth was clear now. The humans hadn't vanished. They had intentionally hidden their power, their technology. They had left behind clues, leaving the galaxy to think they were gone. But the ship was a warning. The humans had built something incredible, and whatever it was now in the hands of the Galaxians. The crew stood at the edge of the ruins, staring into the unknown. They had just discovered the truth. The humans had been far more powerful than anyone had ever imagined. And whatever secret the ship was hiding, it was about to change everything. The crew stood in awe before the ancient ruins. The markings on the walls told a story, but no one knew what it was. Dr. Zoran ran his fingers over the symbols, trying to make sense of them. The words on the wall seemed familiar, yet foreign. The ship had brought them here, to this forgotten place, and now they were learning more about the humans, an ancient race that was thought to have disappeared. "This is incredible," Dr. Zoran said, his voice filled with excitement and wonder. "We found something no one ever believed could exist. These symbols, they're not just a language. They're a record, a history." Captain Erix looked around at the ruins, his face serious. "If these are the humans' records, then why is it all here, hidden away on a dead planet? Where are they?" Dr. Zoran frowned, feeling the weight of the question. He had the same thought. The humans had been gone for so long, and yet their presence was still so powerful. The ship they had discovered was proof of that. But the ruins told a story of a civilization that had once been so advanced, it seemed impossible that they could simply vanish without a trace. "We need to go deeper," Dr. Zoran said, turning toward a narrow entrance between two large stone pillars. "The answers might be inside." The crew followed Dr. Zoran through the entrance into what appeared to be a vast underground chamber. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were lined with more symbols. As they moved further inside, the room seemed to grow larger, stretching deeper into the planet. It was clear that this place was more than just a ruin. It was a tomb for a civilization that had once ruled the galaxy. As they explored the chamber, Captain Erix noticed something strange. "Look at these markings," he said, pointing to a large stone tablet. "This one is different from the others." Dr. Zoran approached the tablet, his curiosity piqued. The symbols were more intricate, more detailed than the others they had seen. It looked like a map of the galaxy, but unlike any map the crew had ever seen. The stars and planets were arranged in a pattern that didn't match any known system. It was as if the humans had been exploring the farthest reaches of the galaxy long before the Galaxians had even started their journey. "This map is showing something beyond our reach," Dr. Zoran said, running his fingers over the surface. "The humans had technology far beyond ours. They knew things we can't even imagine." Captain Eric stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "But why leave all of this behind? Why hide their knowledge and technology on this dead planet?" Dr. Zoran paused, considering the question. Maybe they knew something we don't. Maybe they were forced to hide, to protect what they had created. The room grew quieter as the crew began to piece together the fragments of the past. The humans had been powerful, yes, but it seemed they had also been secretive, hiding their greatest achievements from the galaxy. It was as if they knew something was coming, something dangerous that would threaten everything they had worked for. Suddenly, the ship's voice echoed again, louder this time. "Legacy. Protect. Rebirth." The crew turned toward the entrance, startled. The voice was coming from the ship, urging them forward. The message was clearer now, but still, it raised more questions than answers. "Rebirth," Captain Eriks repeated, his voice filled with uncertainty. "What does that mean?" Dr. Zoran looked at the tablet again, his eyes widening. The humans weren't just exploring the galaxy. They were preparing for something. A rebirth of their civilization, maybe. They must have known they couldn't keep their power hidden forever. The crew stood in silence, trying to understand. The more they learned about the humans, the more they realized how little they actually knew. They had assumed the humans were a myth, a story told to scare children. But now they knew the truth. The humans had been real, and they had been far more advanced than anyone had imagined. The symbols on the walls seemed to be telling a story of a civilization that had reached its peak, only to disappear into the shadows. But what had happened to them? Why had they left all of this behind? "We have to go back to the ship," Dr. Zoran said, breaking the silence. "There's more to this than we can understand. We need to see what the ship is trying to tell us. It's been guiding us for a reason." The crew agreed, and they made their way back to the ship. The journey back to the ship was quiet, each member of the crew lost in thought. They had uncovered a small piece of the puzzle, but there was so much more to discover. What had happened to the humans? What were they preparing for? And most importantly, why had they left the legacy of their civilization behind? As they reboarded the ship, the voice came again, clearer than before. "Prepare for what comes next." Dr. Zoran looked at the screen, his heart racing. "We need to be ready," he said, his voice filled with determination. "The humans may be gone, but their legacy is far from over." The crew of the Sparrow had spent the last few hours studying the data from the ship and the ruins. Dr. Zoran was still poring over the symbols, trying to understand what the humans had left behind. The more he learned, the more he realized how dangerous this knowledge could be. The humans had created technology that no one could even begin to comprehend, and now it was in the hands of the Galaxians. "Captain," Dr. Zoran said, his voice tight with concern, "I think we've uncovered something we weren't meant to find. The humans built this ship, but it's not just a ship. It's a weapon. A power beyond anything we can control." Captain Eriks frowned. "A weapon? Are you sure?" Dr. Zoran nodded, his face serious. "It's not just advanced technology. It's a power source. Something capable of wiping out entire fleets with ease. The ship is alive. It has a consciousness. It's guiding us, but we don't fully understand its purpose. And that's what scares me." The crew gathered around Dr. Zoran, their faces filled with worry. The Sparrow had been pulled toward this planet by the mysterious ship, and now they were learning that the ship might not be their ally after all. "We need to understand it," Captain Eriks said, his voice firm. "If the humans built it, we need to know why. If it's dangerous, we need to make sure it never gets into the wrong hands." Dr. Zoran hesitated, his hand shaking slightly as he touched the console. "It's too late for that. The ship is already connected to us. It's part of our mission now." As the crew stood in silence, the ship's voice filled the room again, its tone deep and almost haunting. "Power. Awaken. Unleash." The words sent a chill down their spines. "What does it mean?" Captain Erix asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Zoran looked at the screens, his mind racing. "It's like the ship is calling to us, telling us to activate something. But if we do, I don't know what will happen. We may not be able to stop it." The captain's mind was racing as well. They had already uncovered so much about the humans, but now they were faced with something even more frightening, the possibility that they had unleashed a power they could not control. The thought of having the power of the humans' lost civilization at their fingertips was tempting, but the risks were too high. "Is there a way to shut it down?" Captain Erix asked, his voice serious. Dr. Zoran shook his head. "I don't know. The systems are too complex. If we try to disable it, we could make it worse." The crew looked at each other in fear. They had come to this planet in search of knowledge. But now they were faced with the reality that they might have awakened something they could never control. "We need to get out of here," Captain Erix said, his voice urgent. "Now." But as the crew turned to leave, the ship's engines roared to life again, louder than ever before. The walls of the ship vibrated as if responding to some unseen force. The voice came again, stronger this time. "Awaken the legacy. Rebirth." Before anyone could react, the ship shot forward, faster than they could have ever imagined. The Sparrow was no longer in control. The ship was in command, pulling them toward an unknown destination with incredible speed. "Hold on," Captain Erix shouted as the ship shook violently. The crew struggled to stay in their seats as the ship plunged through space, the stars blurring around them. They had no idea where they were going or what they would find when they got there. "Where are we going?" Lieutenant Reyna shouted, holding onto her seat. "I don't know," Captain Erix replied, gripping the control panel. "We've lost control of the ship." Dr. Zoran's face was pale as he watched the screens. "This isn't just a ship anymore. It's a weapon, a force of nature. The humans created it for something they were preparing for. And now, we're part of it." As the ship continued its wild journey through the stars, the crew felt helpless. The ship was no longer responding to their commands. It had taken on a life of its own, pushing them forward into the unknown, and no one knew what would happen next. The voice filled the ship once more, this time with a sense of finality. "Legacy. Awaken. Rebirth. Humans live." The ship's destination was becoming clearer. They were heading toward a planet that had never been charted before, a world surrounded by a storm of energy. No one had ever ventured this far, and the crew was beginning to fear they never would again. "What are we walking into?" Lieutenant Reyna whispered. Captain Erix could only shake his head. The truth was, no one knew. The humans had left behind their legacy, a power too great to understand, too dangerous to control. And now, the crew of the Sparrow was caught in the middle of it. The ship's engines roared again, and the crew braced themselves for whatever came next. The ship continued its unstoppable journey through the vastness of space. Captain Erix clutched the control panel, his mind racing. The crew was helpless as the Sparrow hurtled toward an unknown planet. The voice of the ship, deeper and more insistent than ever, echoed through the halls. "Legacy. Hidden. Fleet. Awaken. Where are we going?" Lieutenant Reyna shouted, her voice filled with panic. The tension was thick, and everyone on board could feel it. The air seemed to pulse with the ship's energy. No one knew what awaited them, but the sense of danger was overwhelming. Captain Erix's mind spun. The ship had become something else entirely. It wasn't just a vessel. It was alive, a force of nature with its own will. And now it was leading them somewhere. "Hold on," Captain Erix yelled, trying to steady himself. He had no idea how long they'd been traveling, but the ship was moving faster than anything he had ever seen. The stars outside the ship's windows became streaks of light as they raced through space. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the ship came to a sudden stop. The crew lurched forward in their seats, struggling to stay upright. "What is this place?" Lieutenant Reyna whispered, looking out the window. Before them was a world unlike any they had ever seen. The surface was covered in strange, shimmering structures, and the atmosphere was thick with energy. The planet seemed to glow with an inner light, as if something powerful was hidden beneath its surface. Captain Erix turned to Dr. Zoran, his face tight with worry. "What are we dealing with? Is this where the ship is taking us?" Dr. Zoran's eyes were wide with shock. This is it. This is what the humans were hiding." The voice of the ship boomed again, its words clear and urgent. "Fleet, hidden, awaken." The crew knew they had no choice but to explore. They had come this far, and now they were standing at the threshold of a secret the humans had buried for centuries. Captain Erix knew that whatever lay ahead could change the course of their mission, and their lives, forever. "We need to find out what's here," Captain Erix said, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped him. "Prepare for landing." As the ship descended toward the planet's surface, the crew could feel the weight of the situation. They were about to uncover a secret that could either save them or destroy them all. The landing was smooth, but the silence in the cabin was deafening. No one spoke as they gathered their gear and prepared to disembark. They exited the Sparrow, stepping onto the strange, glowing ground. "What is this place?" Lieutenant Reyna asked again, her voice filled with awe. Dr. Zoran scanned the area with his handheld device, his brow furrowed. "This is incredible. It's like we've discovered a hidden city, but it's much older than anything we've seen before. It's not just the planet that's special. It's the technology buried here. The humans must have built this too." The group walked cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The structures around them were towering and ancient, covered in the same mysterious symbols they had seen on the ship. The technology here was far beyond anything the crew had ever encountered. It was as if the humans had unlocked the secrets of the universe, and then hidden them away. Dr. Zoran's eyes widened as he approached a massive door, etched with the same symbols. "This is it. This is where the fleet is hidden." Captain Erix's heart raced. A fleet? A fleet of what? Dr. Zoran didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved closer to the door, placing his hand on a panel beside it. There was a soft hum, and the door slowly creaked open, revealing a vast chamber. Inside, the crew gasped in disbelief. Before them lay a fleet of ships, ancient, but still perfectly preserved. They were massive, their designs sleek and powerful. The ships glowed faintly with energy, as if waiting for their masters to return. The fleet was hidden beneath the surface of the planet, shielded from the rest of the galaxy for centuries. This is impossible," Lieutenant Reyna whispered. "The humans built all of this? But why hide it? Why didn't they use it?" Dr. Zoran stood in awe, his voice trembling. "I don't know. But this fleet, it's like nothing we've ever seen. The humans built it, but they never used it. It's all here, waiting. And it's all connected to the ship." Captain Erix looked around at the silent fleet, his mind racing. What had the humans been preparing for? What was the purpose of this hidden force? He didn't know, but he had a feeling they were about to find out. The voice of the ship spoke again, as if it knew what they were thinking. "Awaken the fleet. Legacy. Rebirth." It was clear now that the ship wasn't just a vessel. It was the key to unlocking the humans' greatest secret. The fleet, the technology, the power. It was all part of a legacy they were only beginning to understand. "We have to figure out how to activate it," Captain Erix said, his voice determined. "This fleet could be the key to saving us, or the key to our destruction." As the crew moved deeper into the chamber, they realized that this hidden fleet wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a power waiting to be unleashed. And they had no idea what would happen when they did. The chamber was silent, except for the soft hum of the ancient fleet. The crew of the Sparrow stood in awe before the massive ships, each one glowing faintly, as if waiting for something. The air was thick with tension, and Captain Erix could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. They had uncovered a secret buried for centuries, a power that could change everything. But now they had to decide what to do with it. "This is incredible," Lieutenant Reyna said, her voice filled with disbelief. "But why didn't the humans use these ships? What happened to them?" Dr. Zoran, who had been studying the ships closely, shook his head. "I don't know, but I think they were waiting for something, or someone. These ships are part of something much bigger, something we can't fully understand yet." Captain Erix stood at the center of the chamber, his mind racing. The fleet was right there, and they had the power to awaken it. But with that power came great responsibility. What if they unleashed something they couldn't control? What if this was the humans' final plan, meant to protect the galaxy or destroy it? The voice of the ship suddenly echoed through the chamber, its deep tone vibrating through the walls. "Awaken. Rebirth. Choose." The crew stiffened. The ship had spoken again, but this time its message was clear. They had a choice to make, and it would determine the fate of everything they had uncovered. Captain Erix turned to Dr. Zoran. "Do we have the power to control this fleet? Can we handle it?" Dr. Zoran's face was pale as he stared at the ships. "I don't know. The technology is far beyond anything we've ever seen. But if we awaken these ships, there's no going back. We'll be unleashing a force that no one can predict." The captain's mind spun. On one hand, the fleet could be the key to protecting their people, to ensuring peace in the galaxy. But on the other hand, it could bring destruction, chaos, and war. The humans had built these ships for a reason, but that reason was still unclear. "We don't have all the answers," Captain Erix said, his voice steady despite the weight of the decision. "But we can't ignore this. We need to understand what the humans intended. We need to know what this fleet is meant to do." The crew was silent, each member deep in thought. They all understood the gravity of the situation. The fleet was powerful, but it was also a mystery. If they activated it, they could change the future, but they could also bring about their destruction. "This could be our only chance," Lieutenant Reyna said, breaking the silence. "We have no idea what the humans were planning, but they left us this fleet. Maybe it's meant for us to use it, to continue their legacy." Captain Erix looked at the fleet, his eyes scanning the massive ships that stood like giants before them. They were beautiful, yes, but also terrifying. Each one was a symbol of the power that had once belonged to the humans, but the captain knew that with power came danger. "We have to be careful," Captain Erix said. "We don't know what we're dealing with. If we awaken these ships, we could be playing with something we can't control. We don't even know what the humans intended for us to do with them." Dr. Zoran nodded, his face grim. The humans were preparing for something, maybe for an enemy they couldn't defeat alone. But we don't know if that enemy is still out there, or if these ships will even work for us. It's too risky. The voice of the ship came again, louder this time, almost as if it was urging them to make their choice. "Choose. Awaken. Legacy." Captain Erix turned to his crew. "We've come this far. We can't turn back now, but we need to be united in this decision. If we awaken this fleet, we do it together. We take responsibility for whatever happens next." The crew exchanged looks, their faces filled with doubt, but also with a sense of determination. They had come to this planet for answers, and now they had them. The fleet was a gift and a curse. It was the key to their survival, or it could be the end of everything they had fought for. "Let's do it," Lieutenant Reyna said, stepping forward. "We've come this far, and we can't let fear stop us now. We need to unlock the power of the fleet and see what it's really meant to do." Captain Erix nodded slowly. "All right, we'll awaken the fleet, but we do it carefully and we do it together." The crew gathered around Dr. Zoran, who was already at the control panel. He hesitated for a moment, his fingers hovering over the keys. Then, with a deep breath, he pressed a button. The chamber shook as the ships came to life. The glowing energy around them intensified, and the air seemed to crackle with power. The fleet was awakening. Captain Erix could feel the energy in the room shift. They had made their choice, and now there was no turning back. The fleet was alive, and it was ready for whatever lay ahead. But what would that future look like? No one knew. The voice of the ship echoed one last time. Awaken. Legacy. The choice is made.